All right. Welcome back to the Strength Starts Here podcast, episode 5. Today we're going to have a little BS talk on some maybe little gym myths.
Yeah.
And
If it's overtraining or under recovering.
yeah,
I think that's probably the biggest myth.
that's the right.
Right?
No, I agree 100%. I think this overtraining, we hear about it all the time, especially from probably the maybe physical therapists, sometimes your trainers. There's just a lot of it out there on the internet. You know, when are you overtraining too much? What's causing that? And I disagree and I agree 100% on both of it. I think it has everything to do with how we think, and that is a little bit more in the lines of, are you under recovering compared to overtraining? And what does that mean? So if you want to take it from there, start off a little bit.
So I think for me, I kind of I fell into this early in my career in strength sports of, believing that I was overtraining. So then I would dial back my training or whatnot. And it wasn't necessarily that I was overtraining. It was that I wasn't stretching. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't, sleeping enough, or whatever it was outside of the gym that I wasn't doing. And I think like when you first start lifting, for a lot of people, you think that everything you do in the gym is enough, right? And then, you leave and then it's just life outside the gym and then gym life. So I think the more serious lifters, the ones that kind of have it figured out, they focus more on that eating, for performance, right? That's probably the biggest one, I think. Eating for the performance and then also sleeping. I think those are the two things that if a lot of lifters did and corrected on themselves, they would be able to push themselves harder in the gym, right? You can't, if you're waking up after getting 4 hours of sleep to go do fasted cardio because you stayed up too late the night before, well, you didn't sleep long enough. And, like they say, you're stepping over dimes or stepping over dollars for dimes. Is that what it is, right? So you got to make sure you're doing the right stuff to be able to recover correctly. And like I said, to me, it's if I'm not getting enough sleep or, good enough sleep, that's the big thing too. For a lot of us, we might be sleeping for 10 hours, but we're not actually asleep for 10 hours and our body's not in that recovery zone. So then we have to, whether you do sleep gummies or CBDs or whatever it is that you do, or CPAPs, right? So making sure that sleep is quality, to make sure that, now I sleep for 6 to 7 hours, but it's solid sleep. My machine tracks it, so it tells me that I've hit those levels of REM and I'm actually recovering while I sleep.
Or if you have allergies like you do now,
Yeah.
and you're trying to wear the CPAP, it'll actually show you that the quality wasn't as good.
Exactly.
So you got to get a nap in maybe, or take an extra rest day, or just try to clear up the allergies somehow.
Yeah, and
it's been a little rough over here lately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, these desert allergies get me.
I've never really had allergies
Yeah.
until this year. And I was just telling you earlier, I was just sitting there on my computer, just like eyes are just like wet and crying. What the heck's going on there?
Yeah, it was about 2 years ago that it got so bad. Like I went like a month without my machine. Finally went and saw an allergist and was able to.
Just because the machine don't work if you can't breathe.
Yeah, exactly. There's nowhere for the air to go.
Yeah.
And then so I went and saw an allergist and got tested and started the allergy shots and they helped. But then at a certain point, my body like almost rejected them, I guess.
Yeah.
So I had like a systemic inflammation.
Everywhere, though.
Everywhere, yeah. Like it was, I got off of the allergy shots. I was taking them, I think by the time I was done, they were every other week, and to a 1-to-1 ratio of the allergen. And once I got off of those, I lost like 10 pounds, just an inflammation, It was that bad. I felt terrible. And again, I was pushing myself in the gym, but my body wasn't processing everything that I was giving it right. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't doing this. I was under recovering.
Well, and so much of recovery is reducing inflammation.
Right.
And then now you have all these allergies. You're giving yourself the allergy, the allergen, so your body can create an antibody for it. And it just wasn't happening. So you're totally double the inflammation at that point.
Yeah.
On top of adding in, if your diet's not all the way on spot, you're adding in incorrect foods, that might add some inflammation as well, right? Guts, everywhere, muscles, on top of it all. But a couple of things you were touching on for that, under recovery portion of it, you went through a whole bunch of things, so I'll try to catch what I can remember there. But, for me, it was, I kind of, what's the priority? And I think that would kind of help people as well. I think sleep is key. Mm-hmm. And I think for a business owner and a guy that's always just cranking and going all the time, I mean, my average sleep while I do what I do was 5 hours last year. And that was up from 3 hours. And I didn't feel good at all. You feel like crap, but I was still able to train and lift some PRs and some heavyweight in my powerlifting. But at some point in time, your body will break. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Absolutely.
Just in pushing those weights anyway. And then if you're under repairing, not getting enough sleep. So my whole goal when I got off the stage last year, September, was like, what do I need to focus on for this next coming year? And the number one thing was sleep. Was I got to get my sleep up. So we got it up to 7 hours of sleep. Now I don't do anything unless I get that 7 hours. Yeah. Maybe occasionally I'll get a 6 hour night. Dude, I feel it. It's crazy how much I feel it. When you're always running in a deficit, your body becomes a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
But now that I get those 7, I feel so much different. My lifts are so much better. Now I'm trying to push it to 8 hours. I'm trying to get the 9, get a nap in if I can, because it is so critical to how I feel and how I perform, not just for the muscle and the strength and the tearing down the muscles and hurting your elbows and shoulders and hips, but also for your gut health.
Yeah.
You got to get that sleep for the gut health. And when you're eating 6 to 8 times a day, if your gut's locked up, man, because you're not getting enough sleep, you just end up bloating. You feel like crap. You got a whole other set of problems.
Well, you're not processing your proteins. None of the nutrients are hitting. So
I think that number one on the overtraining for me wasn't overtraining necessarily. It was just undersleeping was my number one recovery issue. So I've worked on that. It's a lot better. Then also, the guy that's out there working construction or doing, manual labor, it's 110 degrees out here in the summer. Is he hydrating enough on top of it, right? And is he getting enough breaks to fuel that? Fuel his work for while he's out there, as well as when he comes into the gym and hits it hard. Is he getting enough hydration? And then as you get into that's more of your average dude, right? But as you get into a little bit more competitive, are we eating enough times a day then on top of it all? So I think...
and eating the right stuff too, right?
Yeah, because you're trying to, reduce inflammation. Yeah. Everything that you're doing in the gym, and I think that's that common myth that we were chatting about, I was at the gym. I did 5 hours of training this week at the gym. Maybe I got 6 hours. That's all I got to do. Goes home and has a fucking hot dog and some burgers and maybe a beer. But does that religiously every day, and then wakes up in the morning and has his donut and his coffee and maybe a protein shake because he thinks that's what it takes.
Oh, that's the balance you're after,
right? That balance, right? But but then you see these same guys looking the same way all the time.
Oh yeah.
There's never any progression with their lifts, and you know what? Maybe they're coming into the gym and all they're trying to do is just give them that mental break that they need. Great. But when you're trying to get to that next level and to be a competitive lifter or step on stage, you need to start bringing all those things in a row. And food is one of those things that comes next on the line. The types of foods can add inflammation to your body. So if you're constantly eating the fried foods and the foods that are, not to get into a whole nother line here, but are we eating too much protein? See a lot of young gals thinking that they just if I get my protein in, that's all I need. But there's a little bit more to that, and that's adding undue inflammation on the body, undue stress on the kidneys, and we don't need that. As we're trying to improve. But And then also training. So I think for me, it's in that kind of order of sleep, because sleep is so important for how you perform, how you feel, how your gut repairs. Hydration throughout the day is key. Adding, salt to every meal, not necessarily having to stress out and worry about it, but are we getting enough salt for the output that we're doing in the environment that we're in? Being a hot environment where you're drinking a lot of fluids, are we also adding in the electrolytes? And then also the foods. Are we eating the foods consistently through the day to maintain that training style that we're trying to thrive for? And then as well as what type of foods are we eating during that?
Yep. And with that, too much of those things, right? So you got to find that balance.
Right.
If you're having 6 Gatorades a day, you're probably doing too much, because there's very few people that go into the gym that actually need that much,
Right.
rehydration.
Well, I think that brings up another myth too.
Right.
That Gatorade is a hydrator.
Yeah.
And I think it's not. Gatorade is intentionally made to be mixed 50-50 with water, actually.
Yeah.
And now people use it more as a flavored drink
Right.
instead of what it was actually made for. For the Florida Gators, in a hot environment, humid environment, but they would mix it half and half, 50-50 in the 80s when Gatorade came to life. But it's just a ton of sugar too. So is the dude during his training utilizing that much glycogen to need that much sugar too?
And they're out there, I'm sure.
Yeah. There's guys that need X, but like you said, if you're reading a forum for the top level athlete and you're just starting, there's probably a little bridge in there that we need to gap before we get there. So
Yeah, so too much of those supplements, too much of the wrong foods, too much of the right foods too, for that matter, right? Like you were saying, you can have too much protein, now you're putting stress on your kidneys, and now you're now you're causing other issues that just avoid. And I think that you could almost look at most lifters, and again, the ones that want to progress and everything.
And, like an intermediate guy getting into trying to compete at a higher
semi-competitive,
level.
whatever it is. If they've stalled, right, or they're just really, really slow to progress, you can almost just, what are you doing outside the gym? Mm-hmm. What is it, once you leave here, tell me your day. And you fix 2 to 3 of those things like we talked about, and that progress is going to reignite. Then you're going to do it again. And then, maybe they fall back off of it, and then you got to redirect them again. But I think for any lifter that's out there, if you're doing it on your own or you've got a coach or something, look at what you're doing outside the gym, and don't blame you being sore. Don't blame, on the fact that you went too hard at the gym. Now that, newcomers, they want to come in and start throwing around big weights and stuff. Well, yes, you overtrained, right? Like, you overtrained for what you're capable of doing. And then, you do that too long, and now you're broken, and then, now you blame overtraining. Well, again, slow progression, but recover correctly, and build up on that.
I kind of look at things as percentages sometimes in my mind. That's how I kind of work. What are the levels of my buckets? What are the buckets? If we're in the gym for 5 hours a week, let's say it's 10 hours. Let's say we do 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Well, how many hours are there in a week? And if you think that those 10 hours mean everything, it's really probably only 5 to 10% of your overall growth is going to be actually completed in the gym.
Right.
30% of it should be sleeping. 30% of your life, if you're training at an intermediate to a little bit more aggressive level of competition, probably should be resting at some point where you're actually in sleep, repairing that body, repairing the gut. And then, the food, how much of that, if you're eating 6 times a day, that becomes quite a bit of your life there. So that's a higher percentage. We tend to focus on, I lifted weights. Well, that's 5%, 10% maybe, and it's a very small portion. Now, you need to maximize that 10%, just like you need to maximize every one of these things so you do not overtrain, right? but also just looking at it kind of like, okay, where am I putting my, as a business owner, I'm always standing back and trying to look, where am I putting my resources as we're building the business? Does it make, yeah, this is what I want to do, but is that going to really bring the profit here? So we got to focus on the nuts and bolts first before we do the fun things like buying new equipment,
Right.
and some of the, fun stuff like that. But then there is also the point where you have your sleep dialed in, you do have your training dialed in. Maybe the next thing on the line would be a little bit of body work, right? When you do tweak and injure yourself, because you do end up pushing yourself to a little bit higher level right before a competition, right? Your weights increase past the 80 to 85%. You're not doing sets of 10 anymore. You're doing 1 rep maxes, 3 rep maxes. That just increases your chances of an injury. Just going over that 85%, statistically, it increases by like 87% as soon as you go over the 85, 90% of your 1 rep max in any lifts. So as a bodybuilder, we tend to put a little bit more emphasis on the volume, but you still can lift heavy weights with X amount of volume where you're breaking that 90% threshold, and you just all of a sudden start increasing your risk of injury. So then at that point, are we repairing? Are we giving enough time off? Instead of going, I only have 16 more chest sessions before I got to step on stage. Instead of going, let's back off for 1 week, change the exercises around, still target the muscle, but let's give the elbow a little room to breathe. And I just went through a similar thing. And I'm repairing it while still actively progressing. So, getting the taping or the scraping or the massage therapy, chiropractic if you need it. I think that would be in that order is how I see it. I don't know how you see it. Like sleep, hydration, food, and then
the body work.
And then probably into the body work,
Yeah.
Nutrition and then the body work.
Yeah. No, and I think I'd agree to that. A lot of us let a little injury go too long, and try to train through it. And
100%
right?
of the time.
Yeah.
I can deal with the pain, and then it turns into something.
Yeah, and then now you got an imbalance that's causing another issue, and then so again, you're not overtraining it, you're under recovering it. So you got to go back and you got to let's work on this elbow. Let's figure out what's going on,
and maybe analyze how you got there in the first place.
Right?
Was it lifting because you only had 2 hours of sleep, and that's what broke it?
Yeah.
Was it going too heavy when you didn't really need to? Was it,
It's usually mine.
Dude, I love to lift heavy, and that's my common denominator always. I'm trying to have a paradigm shift in my thought process toward weights, but I just like to lift heavy. Now it's like, okay, we'll lift heavy, but it's got to be at X amount of reps as the minimum reps. And you still can go pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's so then after body work, I think if you got all those in there, is there more that you can do? I think at that point,
becomes the very, very little things then, right?
Yeah, and I would say like after the body work and you're still, maybe still getting these niggles, look at what exercises you're doing. Mm-hmm. Are they putting you in a certain plane that, doesn't work with your mechanics? Should you switch them up? And then that would be the next myth is that, some people want constant changes. Some people want to stay on a program for 6 months of the same program. I do think that 4 to 5 weeks is that, to me, that sweet spot. You can see the progression. You can change up some movements.
And not necessarily all of them.
No, right? Because if you're doing powerlifting, you're doing strongman, there's certain movements we've got to do.
Your key lifts that you got to incorporate.
Right. So we're probably not dropping a squat, but maybe instead of, a barbell squat, we're, changing it up to a Hatfield, or we're changing it up to, to another variation of it. But at the end of the day, it's still a squat, right? So
that's where it comes down to that, if you've gotten an injury or now you've had one and you don't want to get one again.
Yeah.
Having that little refresher every 4 to 6 weeks where you're just looking at all your lifts, seeing how your progression's going, thinking about how you're feeling, seeing if everything else is in line, and then making those adjustments on the lifts. So, maybe you're just fatiguing in your posterior chain every single week because you look at your training, it's like, well, I'm doing deadlifts, I'm doing good mornings on back day.
I wonder why.
And then, and that's your hamstring day.
Yeah.
And then on your squat day, you're doing squats, you're doing, it's like, well, maybe we need to go to a belt squat and give a little relief. Or maybe we need to back off of the good mornings and maybe do the reverse hyper or something like that, and just make these little adjustments till you find what still can activate and work the muscle but not take it to failure. And that's, for me, that's where I found is the lower back fatiguing fast. And I think that might be true for most of us too that lift at a high level. That posterior chain gets taxed first because that your spinal erectors are working all day long whether we want it or not. Otherwise we wouldn't sit upright, right? Or stand upright. It sort of constantly puts so much stress. There's other ways to work around, still work those muscles and save those for once a week.
Right.
So I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, so if you can kind of change up the training style even, right? Give your body another plane to work on. I think we talked about that last week. If you're constantly in that, same plane of motion, then those injuries are just going to continue to happen. So give your body a break, work on some accessory movements, and really, again, you're helping the recovery process of that posterior chain. Mm-hmm. If you kind of do a different movement that's still building it, but just the adductors and abductors like we talked about, mm-hmm. Those are just going to help, make this section better, right? So
changing, if your hips are starting to hurt, look at your stance of your squat or your stance of your deadlift.
Yeah.
Do we need to, if we're far enough out in our meet prep, whether it's a strongman event or a powerlifting event or a bodybuilding for that matter, can we change that moving up to a wide stance from a narrow stance? And will that relieve the hip and still activate what we're trying to grow, right?
And I think that's where maybe strongman has the upper hand in that. Because I think with strongman, you can adjust your stance, and still be working that movement for an event.
Right.
Because, what is the purpose, we do our events, and then everything behind that is just to make that event better, right, for that training session. We're doing log. Okay, well, we got to do some more presses. We got to do some tricep. We're going to do some, whatever it is, calf raise, whatever you want to do that you think is going to make your log press better. So if you're constantly switching your foot placement on a squat or something like that, well, now it doesn't matter, how wide that stone is. It doesn't matter, how wide you got to go for the bag pick or, whatever. So I think that's
more room to play.
Yeah, right. And then if you can train in different, positions and placements, it just makes you a more rounded strongman, You might not be able to go as heavy on, a super wide sumo squat as you can on your, normal powerlifting squat, right?
But at least you can give a little relief while you're bringing that up and saving it for the event.
Exactly.
So it's still working.
Yeah.
And I think it brings up another myth, or myth, maybe it's not called a myth, but, just because one guy did X on his routine for, let's say it's leg day, doesn't mean that you need to use his same exact accessories to his squat to be as strong and look as him. Every body is individual to the individual.
Yeah.
Right? Specific to the individual. So there are some movements that I will steer away from because I get injured 3 out of 5 times when I do that movement, but I still can grow that body part using a different variation or accessory. So if you are getting to that intermediate level, and getting a little bit more advanced, maybe a little guidance from a good coach that's been down that road before, that can see what's going on and go, oh, shoot, maybe, you're not pushing through your heels on that deadlift. We're going to go warm up on the leg press. Like you've used that example quite often. Warming up the adductors and abductors for me is a huge thing now. Because you get so used to this frontal plane, we forget to move side to side. So adding that in just balances the body out.
Yep, absolutely.
And so it's reducing overtraining, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're able to give this a break, still work the muscles, but we're now doing it in a different plane.
And I guess let's define overtraining.
Okay.
My definition of it would be injury prone, right? Being injury prone in a certain movement or not. And then just that constant body fatigue, right? So if you're trying to combat those things, and you're not just trying to not overtrain, because I think people that I don't want to overtrain. Instead of doing 4 sets of 12, they're doing 3 sets of 6, or but same weight, But I don't want to overtrain, so I'm just going to cut the weight, cut the reps, cut the set, and I'll be okay. Well, that's unnecessary, right? So
I think, go ahead.
my overtraining, I think, would be different from yours, absolutely, right? Like, how many times have we been out of town and we went and hit up a gym, and then I tried to jump in on the your shoulder workout when we were up at
Yeah.
right,
Scottsdale.
yeah, in Scottsdale, and that was overtraining for me. And by the end of the workout, I was like, I'm
smoked.
screwed.
Yeah. Different training styles
Yeah.
too, so you got to do what's right for you too, right?
Yeah, and at that point, I wasn't used to the
Volume.
you were like in bodybuilding prep. You were getting ready for stages, and that wasn't me. I was getting ready for 1 rep max logs. I was getting ready for yoke walks. So my body had been conditioned differently, but maybe 4 years ago I could have hung a little closer, right?
Right. Yeah, I think I also think too we tend to be a little bit more pushing the threshold. Like
Yeah.
if this is overtraining and this is max output, we're right there every training session.
Well, you bought the whole speedometer. Don't just use part of it, right?
Exactly. The pedal goes all the way down, bro. You can
There's
keep
a
pushing.
reason why it goes all the way.
So I think in looking at it from that perspective, being trying to be the elite, and maximize everything all the time, we want to come all the way up to that line, touch it, but not cross it.
Right.
And if every session is like that, if you are not on in all those other areas we chatted about, or you go from, all right, last week we did squats at 500 pounds for 3 sets of 5, but this week we're doing 405 for 4 sets of 10. Doable.
Yeah.
Maybe
Sounds
the max
miserable.
Miserable anyway, because just the rep range is up.
Yeah.
So a dude that's always training under that 5 rep max, and now all of a sudden he's going to do a 10 by 10 day with 225.
Yeah.
10 squat or 10 sets of 10 with 225 or 315. It sounds miserable.
Yeah.
I know I could do that right now because that's what I've conditioned my body to. And I'm going to stay away from the 3 rep heavy set right now because it doesn't fit what I'm trying to do at the time.
Right.
So I think younger guys and more beginner intermediate guys can get away with bouncing back and forth because their true output isn't what an experienced athlete's true output is. When Marshall or you or I get under the bar and that's a heavy lift, that's a heavy lift.
Right.
I mean, that's it right there. We're putting it all out right now. Compared to when you're young, it's like, well, that went up. You don't know where your levels are at. You're still trying to figure your body out.
When you get done and the guy goes, yeah, man, you got another 80 pounds.
Yeah, and you're like,
Well,
what the hell?
I don't know.
So I think there's that, there's a lot of little factors that factor into overtraining as well, right?
Yeah.
But, to keep it simple in general, follow your plan, make progressive improvements week, whether it's reps or a little bit of weight. As long as that goes up every week, you don't have to push a max every week. And I think that is a common misconception. Not a misconception, that's a common thing I see.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with the younger dudes and gals that come in, more so dudes because we got egos. They just like, well, let's try to get that 500-pound deadlift today. We didn't get it last week. Let's try it again this week. Well, maybe if we just took 4 weeks to kind of 4 to 6, maybe even 8. I like a little bit longer ones, 12 weeks. We can go right past that. And I had a kid exactly that did this. Saw him for 6 months trying to get this 500-pound deadlift. Almost every week he's in the gym.
Yep.
Like, dude, so he started coaching with us. In 3 months, his first comp, he pulled 6. 12 weeks later.
Yep.
We had to start him back down and progress. His body was overtraining for what he was eating and how he was repairing. He was overdoing it. The body doesn't respond. It saves itself. Your body has it always wants to save itself. It's saving it for Armageddon when the end of the world comes because we come from the old animals and caveman style. We were waiting for the one saber tooth to come eat our family, and we're saving it to fight that one animal, you know. So our bodies, in a way, kind of protect ourselves that way. We have to mentally push past that, but do it in a progressive way to where we're not overtraining, overlifting for our abilities at the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that concept of taking 5 weeks, or in your case, 12 weeks with that one. I think if you continuously fail, right, you're teaching your body that that's what you're going to do. So if you fail for 6 weeks straight on that deadlift, you're not walking up and getting it on that 7th week.
Yeah.
Right? Like your body already knows.
If you're
mentally,
at 6 weeks
physically,
already, you're
it
past.
knows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But take 3 weeks to 5 weeks, repair, do some light deadlift work, and then come back on that 6th week off, it'll fly.
Yeah.
And it's almost...
It's really that easy. I think, you can get a little more technical with it if you want.
If the bar's moving, let's say that. I'm sorry. If the
I
bar's
do.
stuck on the ground every time and your max should be 405, but you're trying to pull 500, no amount of time off is going to give you that.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, if you're constantly trying to pull that and it's not happening, just without getting too technical, just backing off the weight and doing sets of 5 or 6 for 1 week, and then maybe increase the weight a little bit and bring the reps down to 5, and if you can just do that, steadily increasing the weight, steadily dropping the reps, you're not overtraining. Maybe do some partial work, deficit pulls, maybe some box pulls, things like that. So we are not overstressing the whole body every single time you're in there.
And so that brings me into another myth, right? That failing's not okay, right? If you fail to lift, a lot of people let that get in their head, right? I think the gym is the perfect place to fail.
It's a practice ground.
Right. How many times did you fall on your face when you tried to walk when you were a kid?
Yeah, I don't remember. I was small.
Shit, I'm 34 and I still fall on my face trying to walk sometimes.
You haven't mastered that yet.
No.
Are you overtraining or under repairing here?
See, I try to walk a lot, so it must be overtraining. See? I need to lay down more.
There we go.
I'll take care. I'm done.
And then you get a rest more.
Yeah.
This is a good thing.
But right, like if you're failing that, let's say, again, the deadlift scenario, 475 is your max, and you're going for a 500. You can get 475, no problem, but 500 is your goal, and you fail it. That's okay. Mm-hmm. There's work to be done, How much time did you take off? How much recovery did you do? What additional work did you do to get to that 500? Do you deserve it yet? Did you fail it because you don't deserve it? Because you didn't put in the work and you just... saw a cute girl in the gym, so that's why you're going for 500 tonight. So
did you just get that 475 last week and you thought you could do 500 this week?
Yeah, there are people built like that, which is odd.
No, I was going to mention there is a caveat to Melissa being one of these people.
Yeah.
I'll tell a quick little story. In the gym one time, she only her coach gives her percentages. Mm-hmm. I normally, when I program, I give a weight so the guys don't have to think about it. I just want you to hit this. Don't worry about what you're... She's given percentages. So she pulls this number out of her head. It was a deadlift at the time, and I think she had to pull 425. She's past that now. It's a couple years ago, but she wanted to pull 425 that night for her percentage. It really didn't have to be 425. Yeah. It was the number she put in her head. It could have been 415, and it would still been on the program, right? So she picks the 425, doesn't get it, gets pissed off. We go. It's already 10 p.m. at night. It was 2 exercises in. She never quits a session. She'll stay there the whole time. We go home, we eat, take a nap. She gets up at 2 in the morning, comes back in here. I didn't go with her at the time. I'm like,
it's 2 a.m.
You're kind of crazy. Yeah. And if I pulled a max attempt and didn't pull it and came back 5 hours later, it still ain't coming off the dang ground. I'm already smoked.
Yeah.
It's going to be 4 days before I do it. She came back in, and she got it. So there's a very small percentage of people like that, but they are out there.
Yeah.
I just happen to have one in our facility.
Right.
And live with her every day. So this is not just there. It happens in other areas as well. But yeah, I mean, did you make too big of a jump? Was it 405 last time, and all of a sudden you're like, 6 weeks later, I should be at 425, and you do it. Maybe that was too much. I mean, if 405 was truly your max 6 weeks ago, maybe 415 is the next jump. Maybe 410 is.
I was going to say maybe.
Because in a whole prep, whether it's 12 weeks to and I'm getting a little deep here, 12 weeks
Yeah.
to 6 months, man, you could, if you gain 5% on your lifts, that's a major accomplishment once you're a decent lifter. Once you're
Yeah.
intermediate to elite lifter, if you can do 5% on your lifts over 6 months, that's a massive improvement.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to do that in 6 weeks sometimes, or,
6 days.
Yeah, 6
6
days.
hours.
6 hours. Shit. Yeah. So,
Well,
be realistic with yourself is
Yeah.
kind of what it comes down to. Are you being realistic,
and what is, and I think that there's certain, certain numbers that make a 5-pound jump acceptable,
Right.
right? So to me, I think like a 405 deadlift, starts that like,
Especially for a female, too, right?
oh shit, how many females we got deadlifting 405 these days?
I'm
Jesus.
just saying.
Yeah,
like,
no, definitely.
There's a lot of different factors in there.
Yeah.
I mean, if a dude's 300 pounds and he's been doing this for 10 years and he's pulling
Right.
315 and throw 5 on, that's a little ridiculous.
Well, so if you've been lifting that long
you probably
and
should.
you're not over 315 on your deadlift yet, you're under recovering.
Say you're
somewhere.
a perfectly healthy individual, you got everything going for you,
Yeah.
you're not doing it. At that point in time, we need to work on this guy
Yeah.
a little bit.
Right. So I think that
It's usually not the case, but
I think that like newer lifters and obviously not the seasoned ones because it's a different realm, I guess. at
I
that
always
point.
preface that because
Yeah.
I tend to, and maybe you do too, but I tend to live in that thought process. I'm like, hold on, we're talking about a brand new guy here.
Yeah. Right. And sometimes when I program for people, it's hard for me to. Okay, well, maybe we don't do a 20-pound jump this week. Maybe it's only that 5-pound jump, and that's okay. So, smaller, new lifter, 405 deadlift, and then in 6 weeks, let's say he goes to 410.
There you go.
Well, that's pretty damn good,
Especially if that was his max.
right? Like, I mean, that's nothing to be bashful about, I don't think. I tend to be a little different on it because, when Joe doesn't appreciate the fact that like my deadlift warm ups start at 405.
Yeah.
So he comes into the gym and he starts his workouts. He's a warm up king. He warms up all the way by like 10s the whole way to a 405, damn near. But I warm up at 405. So my next jump is 495. Well, there's some people in the gym that are like, no, if I was at 405, like my next jump is 455 or 425. So I think it's different, right?
It also depends on where you're at
Yeah.
as a competitor.
Yeah.
That's muscle maturity.
Yeah.
That's age in the gym. It's kind of gym wisdom, maybe you
Yep.
call it. But it's also individually based too, because now I've crested that age point to where I have to do plate quarter, plate quarter, plate quarter. Even if I'm going to get to 700 pounds, I have to warm up all the way there.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm pulling something.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. It's frustrating because it's 45 minutes into my training
Yeah.
before I'm like, all right, can we start now? Because it's like takes that long for this old guy to get going.
And I think that's maybe my downfall, right? And is that I don't know. I hesitate to say this on camera. I don't have this. I don't have the stamina, in the squat rack to be able to do those kind of jumps.
Right.
It's plate, 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 up to 585. And then I'll go 635, and then So
I was using an example. I'm
absolutely.
a plate jumper.
Yeah. So, but there are people who, and that's the other myth. Another myth in there. Well, I've been training just as long as you. I'm near the same size as you. I should be lifting what you do. Well, no.
Everybody's different, dude.
Yeah. There's
We got a dude in here. He's probably 220.
Yeah. I was gonna say no more than 230 for sure.
Yeah, and he can deadlift 950, and I ain't deadlifted no 950 in my lifetime. I could just put that out there right now and be comfortable with it.
I'm gonna try one day.
You could try all you want. I ain't gonna try. I'm okay with not at this point.
So that is right, and then we got 220ers that deadlift 315. And that's their max right now. So it's all about the training style, the history of it. And so that myth of, well, I weigh the same as you and I can outlift you.
And I think that
that's a shit attitude.
Well, I think it brings up something that I was thinking about 5 minutes ago, which is what you see out there in the world. You know, what you see on social media, what you see, you're following these dudes and they're doing that. You're like, and this has happened in our facility. You know, you come up and you look at the powerlifting board, and it's got all the weights in there, and it's got the guys in there that have competed. They're like, oh, wow, you guys are really strong. I'm like, dude, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
You don't have to lift that weight,
Right.
just because that dude's in there. I mean, a guy like Vinny, you know, deadlifting 780 and squatting 780.
Right.
You know, it's like, shit, most people won't ever get to that point. So
Right.
don't be comparing yourself with that.
Yeah.
You gotta, where did you come into the gym? If it's 225 and next week, 6 months down the road, you're at 315, man, you made some
Damn.
serious
Oh,
improvement, right? You know, and it's hard because, yet again, I preface, that competitive mindset. It's like, well, shit, if that dude in my weight class is doing this, well, I got to be at least that or better, right?
Well, and that's what I kind of appreciate about that leaderboard in there. It's not a leaderboard, right? It's a brag board, I think.
It's a brag board in our facility. Like a lot of gyms will have it to where they get, you know, each weight class, squat, bench, and deadlift.
The best one.
And it's the best one. What we wanted to do in our community was put everyone that competes
Yeah.
on a platform gets to put their name in there once they compete. So it just shows
Yep.
the diversity.
And again, it breaks that myth of,
Right.
well, Vinny's, what do I have, 50 pounds at least on Vinny, 60 pounds? And he out deadlifts me,
Well, we got to let's remember this though.
you know?
5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I met him and we opened this facility,
He's like 550, no.
the dude was only squatting 500.
Yeah.
And now he's squatting almost 8.
Yeah.
5. And before that, he had 5 or 6 solid years of powerlifting under his belt. So this is a 10-year progression for the dude
Yep.
to get from where he started to deadlifting that. I mean,
So quick math, that's almost 60 pounds a year?
yeah, I don't
That is incredible.
But if this is kind of breaks the myths in the fact that there's no myth about this. It takes 10 years, 10,000 reps, 10,000.
Yeah.
I mean,
It takes time.
that's proof. And
Right, and
Melissa's proof. She's 12, 13 years in, and she's really hitting her stride now and her strength. You know, it's coming together to where I was sitting there yesterday doing legs with her, and I'm just like, after we got done training, I'm like, dude, I did her weights and reps through the whole leg training session. I might have done a couple of exercises where I doubled or tripled the rep
Right.
ranges, but I just was at her weight. I'm like, this woman is so freaking strong. She's coming into her own.
Yep.
12 years in.
12 years later. And that's what sucks, right? It's that we get these snapshots of these guys now,
The best.
you know?
Their best
Yeah.
at their best.
You know, and then you fail to realize, oh, they've been doing it for 10 years. Okay, well, you know, and I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but I'll see a newcomer on the scene and be like, well, shit, I haven't heard of him before. He must be newer to the sport. So he's probably been lifting for 2 years or so.
Right.
Right, and that's usually not the case, right? Like Andy Black, he's Scotland's strongest man. He's doing these huge shows now, and he's legitimately been in the sport for 2 years. You know,
So you do get those guys, but it's literally
it's a fraction
of a percent.
you know. So, and back to that, we weigh the same, so we must lift the same. No, not the case, right? It's how much dedication, how much time you put into the art, right? So,
Well, and to kind of tie that all in with the overtraining, in 12 years of Melissa training, or 10 years or 11, 12 years of Vinny training, or me or you, how many times have we overtrained? Have we gotten injured? Have we learned through that process to maximize our bodies in, sleep, hydration, food, rest, recovery, repair, and supplements, and all these things? How long did it take us to maximize how we feel in our own body?
Right.
Right. And man, we all have been through some of it, some more than others.
yeah.
But like I said, you're always when you are pushing that 85 plus, you're gonna get injured, and especially when you're getting to those max levels where you're trying to deadlift 800-900 pounds, or Vinny's going for over 800 pounds trying to get those big totals. Melissa benching 315 as a 150-pound woman,
Right.
And deadlifting, she's got to be getting to close to fives and stuff like that now. When you're doing that, all of a sudden when you step into that gym and everything you do in the extra part of your life, you're conscious of what you're doing for those lifts, so you are recovered as much as possible, so
Yeah.
you do not overtrain.
I mean, I don't know how many times, whether it be at work or wherever I'm at, like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna lift that. I gotta train, so and
Right.
so. I know if I lift that right now, that's gonna derail that or it's gonna injure me or not. I did want to point some out though. So with Melissa and Vinny, right? Just two, we'll call them freaks, right? Vinny is probably one of the most diligent in his recovery work.
Correct.
Right. He comes in. He stretches
And mobility work.
And mobility, yes. He comes in. He works on his mobility and his stretching and all that jive. Then does his workout. And then does it again. Well, I don't do that.
Yeah, and when you're owning a business, man, you're strapped for time. So
Yeah.
But the thing is you start going, man, I'm so flipping tired of being injured.
Oh yeah.
And I'm so tired of coming into the gym and not being able to hit my weights I know I can.
Yeah.
That you start changing your mindset, and I we're stubborn too, as we are elite lifters. And I can say that for Melissa and I. We're dang stubborn as well because we know what it takes to get X.
Yep.
But then at the same time, it almost got to break us 2 or 3 times to be able to you got to change a couple things in order to keep moving, progressing.
Yeah. And I wish that I would learn that soon.
Me too.
Right, because I keep getting these little injuries, that derail me from something, or turn into big injuries, because I'm not doing the proper recovery as far as mobility and stretching. I obviously sleep enough and eat enough now, but how much time do you and Melissa work on the mobility, the stretching, and that?
Melissa's is absolutely. She was the type of gal like you. She'd come in, grab the weight, boom, boom, boom. Mm-hmm. First set's done. Then 10 minutes, she's already max effort. Now it's 20 minutes on leg days.
Yep.
For mobility and just getting all the blood flowing in the right areas before we even step on the platform, before we even grab a weight. So that's improved. But how was it 2 years that she had some piriformis issues and, had to really go, well, crap, now that I'm consistently lifting heavier for years now, as you age and you're getting stronger and you're maxing everything out, we got to add something in to help this. And so she's doing a lot more of that as well. And I've had to as well, man. Like I said, it takes me 30. I mean, sometimes we're like 2 to 3 exercises in before I'm like, all right, let's start lifting. It takes that much for
I was going to
everything
say your warm up to get into the routine was my entire bicep day the other day, right? Like,
yeah.
By the time we were done, I was like, cool, I'm out.
That's just so I could pull heavy. That I could just do
Right?
some heavy back that day. Was just to get in the elbows and the biceps.
Yeah.
But man, in 6 weeks, I feel like a different person there.
Yep.
And you can really push some things. And I mean, if this guy's hurting and you're trying to pull, which guy's pulling more?
Yeah.
Are you going to get more tension on this side, right?
Exactly.
So for a bodybuilder, and you're looking at a piece of art, once you're standing on stage, right? You want it to be as balanced as possible.
Yep.
And if you have injuries, man, they're just gonna
exacerbate those.
Really big trap on this side, small one on this side. It's an extreme. But I have seen guys that actually look like that too, though. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely some, that don't take that to heart, and kind of the package suffers for it, right?
So I think it's pretty good. We kind of walked through our version of what overtraining looks like, and for the most part, you can control it with the right amount of recovery.
Absolutely.
Work and how you eat and how you sleep and mobility and things like that. And then also we threw in a whole bunch of some gym myths that we've seen, and we might do another podcast on more extreme gym myths. But I think that was pretty good. You got anything else to add?
No. No, I think that wraps it up. Yeah.
Hydrate, sleep, eat right, train your ass off.
Do it all again.
And do it all again. We'll see you next time.